You're not eating enough. Now, I speak to people all the time on consultation calls coming from other coaches or doing their own style of training, their own style of nutrition. And one of the most common things I see are people just having to really dig deep with their calories, like ending a dieting phase on like 400, 500, 600, 700 calories, which is absolutely crazy. Now, instead, what you want to be doing is making sure you're preparing for your diet or your cutting phase before you're actually diving into one. So this is where we introduce a pre-prep or a pre-dieting phase. So a pre-dieting phase basically is us trickling in more calories, kind of like throwing wood on the fire. We're kind of trying to get your metabolism to really burn over nice and fast, gradually trying to build your calories up without gaining any body fat whatsoever. You can kind of see it as a little bit of a recomposition phase. So it means that you're starting from a much higher point before you then drop into your fat loss phase. So by doing a pre-prep or pre-diet phase, what it allows is for you to go into your diet, and especially when you're digging deep towards the end, not needing to go into these crazy low calories, which just mess you up in the long run, screw up your hormones, and actually just get worse results at the end of the day. You feel lethargic, you feel low energy, your muscles are flat, which is what you do not want. You're dropping your fats way too low when you're dieting. Now, I see this one all the time, and that's dropping your fats just way too low into like stupid amounts. So really in general, we want to see fats above about 20% of your calorie intake, okay? Below about 20%, so between 10, 15% maybe, the research tells us quite clearly that we do compromise our hormone production. And obviously hormones are kind of the driver, they're the keys that unlock certain mechanisms that allow us to optimize fat loss and build muscle. So we do want to be keeping fat above that 20% of calorie intake. So don't drop your fats too low and then feel the downside of that. You're dropping your carbohydrates too low, or you're not eating enough carbohydrates. I see this one all the time, more so in women than men. And it tends to be with people that actually have issues with certain carbohydrates rather than carbohydrates in general. Now, if you're anything like me, I love a good fresh loaf of sourdough bread. Now, what happens when I have one slice? It's like, uh-oh, that one slice becomes 2, 3, 4, okay? The next day, I feel like absolute junk because I've eaten an entire loaf of sourdough. Now, it's not the carbohydrates that are the reason why I'm bloated or the reason why I feel as though I don't tolerate them. It's because I've just simply had a giant dump of carbohydrates, okay? It's not necessarily even the bread, it's not the gluten that I have an issue with, it's because I've had a giant dump of carbohydrates that are just sitting there and need to digest as well, okay? So that tends to be what happens with people that claim that their body doesn't deal well with a lot of carbohydrates. It's either having those carbohydrates that are trigger foods, like, you know, if you're anything like me, it's bread or pasta or things like that. Even like excessive amounts of rice can be an issue with some people. Instead, what you want to be doing is actually, you know, I tend to promote a slightly lower fat diet, but maintaining above that 20% of calorie intake. But then we adjust carbohydrates, making sure we're getting as many carbohydrates as we can, but making sure they're the right kinds of carbohydrates. And then if you still have digestive issues with that, or you're not quite feeling right, then we can kind of use a bit of an elimination diet, or you can do that yourself without the need for any coaching. You can kind of eliminate certain carbohydrates to see what feels best. I do tend to find rice is a great carbohydrate because it's fairly controllable. The fiber is fairly low on that one as well, and it doesn't sit there for so long, versus something like getting your carbohydrates from vegetables. They can sit there a lot longer and take a lot longer to digest. That's not me saying don't have vegetables, that's just me saying, you know, there are certain carbohydrates that your body uniquely will respond to better than other people. Consider your food volume. So whether you're trying to gain muscle, do like a maintenance recomposition phase, or trying to lose body fat, you need to be considering the volume of your food. So for example, if we're trying to build muscle, we actually want to be trying to get as many calories as we can for as little food volume as we can. So that enables us to get the calories in that we need to without feeling bloated, without feeling horrible all the time, like we've got a bit of a kind of a belly on us, okay? When we're trying to lose body fat, we're actually trying to get as much food in as we can for as fewer calories as we possibly can. So we're trying to maximize food volume. As an example, you know, I'm a big fan of like egg whites when you're in like a fat loss phase, because we can get a lot of egg whites in there and we can make things fluffy with egg whites like oats and cream of rice. We can make omelets and get a lot of volume out of egg whites. We can also get a lot of volume out of certain vegetables. So for example, in a fat loss phase, you might want to swap some rice for some cauliflower rice, or some spaghetti for courgette, you know, courgette pasta. Swapping potatoes for butternut squash can be a really good option. Everything is context dependent, and it depends on what phase of dieting that you're in. So if you're towards the end of your dieting phase, or you're close to a physique competition, then you actually want to be trying to manage that volume that you're getting in. So we might need to keep things a little bit cleaner and only choose certain vegetables, or, you know, just more think about digestion within that as well. But really, just the main take-home message here is when you're trying to lose body fat, maximize your food volume. When you're trying to build muscle, then you want to minimize your food volume. When we talk about minimized food volume, think about like peanut butter. How many calories are in a tablespoon of peanut butter versus, you know, the actual amount of that? You know, it doesn't take a lot to get 2,000 calories worth of peanut butter, if you're anything like me anyway. Are you taking the right supplements? Now, you might think you're taking the right supplements, but a lot of that is probably driven by good marketing. You know, we know that the nutrition supplement industry has a lot of money behind it. Now, you've got to think of your supplements in terms of what do you need, what are you deficient in, okay? So for example, if you're deficient in vitamin D, which a large majority of people are, then you probably need to be taking vitamin D. If you think you're deficient in magnesium, you probably need to be taking magnesium. By taking extra amounts of something that you've already got a lot of available to you, or, you know, your blood work hasn't shown that you have a deficiency in, then you're not actually getting any added benefits over the top of that. And that's why I'm always a fan of getting your blood work done and actually having a look at that. You know, what's your vitamin status like? What's your iron status like? Things like that, because we can look at those and we can modify your diet and we can modify your supplement regime to make sure that you're filling in the gaps. Supplements are called supplements for a reason. They're to supplement a good, high quality diet. Now, you can't get all of your nutrition, your micronutrients from a diet, especially these days. So you do need to supplement, but you need to be supplementing with the right things. A few that I'm a fan of that I think most people need, and like if I was gonna give a general recommendation, I think most people probably want a vitamin D supplement. D3, if it has K2 in it, it's an added bonus. I do think a lot of people need some form of magnesium. Now it depends on what you're looking to get out of that magnesium. For example, magnesium glycinate will affect or improve your sleep versus something like magnesium threonate is great for brain and cognition. I do think everyone needs to be taking an omega-3 supplement. I do not put krill oil on the same level as an omega-3 supplement. You want a good EPA, DHA fish oil supplement. Another one I'm a big fan of is creatine monohydrate. Don't go for the fancy creatines that are more expensive. Creatine monohydrate, super cheap. Most people, if not all people, you know, from your 16-year-old to your 80-year-old should be taking creatine monohydrate from a health and longevity standpoint, as well as muscle building and retention and recovery as well. As I said, just general recommendations. For more precise recommendations, blood work's great, and obviously chat with your coach. Does your training split fit your goals? Now, I was speaking to someone last week on a consultation call, really high level bikini athlete, and she'd been for the past year with a coach. The training plan had not changed in an entire year. And what she was doing were basically training upper body 3 days a week, lower body 2 days a week. Most of the upper body work was focused on training shoulders, a little bit of back work in there. And then lower body training was mostly quadriceps focused. So it's very heavy on kind of quadriceps focused stuff. One of the first things she said to me on the consultation call was, I have trouble growing my lower body. Judges' feedback has always been, I need bigger glutes. I've been told that my upper body is a little bit too large, I'm out of balance. I'm like, okay, so why for the past year have you been doing the same training program, the exact same training program, by the way, same exercises, same sets, same reps, etc., same training split for the past year that focuses more on upper body. One of the simplest things we've done is simply go in with a brand new training split, high frequency glute specialization phase. We're training glutes 3 days a week, hamstrings, a little bit of quadriceps kind of top up in that as well on different days of the week, adjusting the volume on each day so we can really kind of shock the glutes into some growth while putting upper body into almost maintenance mode, really. So when we talk about training splits, we really do need to be having that training split that's set up ideally for you, your body structure, your goals, okay? If you've been told that your upper body is a lot more dominant than your lower body, or you need glutes and your quads are fine, well, why are you training quads more than your glutes? Why are you training your upper body more than your lower body? You've got to question those things, and that's the same with whether you're working with a coach or whether you're doing your own programming. Unfortunately, this game is not about what you enjoy doing, although like we can sprinkle elements of enjoyment in that as well, but it's about what do you want out of it. So your training split needs to be set up for you. Are you using the right exercises? Now, if you follow me on social media or YouTube or various articles I've written and, Google me, etc., you'll find that I'm always speaking about the meat and potatoes exercises. Now, the meat and potatoes exercises you might be perceiving as like your bench presses, your squats, your deadlifts, and exercises like that, your chin-ups as well. Now, what I actually mean by your meat and potatoes exercises are just those big hitting exercises. So instead of thinking about a big hitting exercise as a deadlift and you have to do a deadlift, there are so many other options that can train that pattern or work your glutes or hamstrings, or both obviously, depending on your body structure. So there are always exercise options that might fit you better rather than trying to mold yourself to what someone else has said is the best exercise for X, Y. So just as an example, I'll give a few of my athletes as an example. So Janine, who's a bikini world champion, masters, we actually find that she's not great with certain split squat variations, especially kind of driving knees over toes. So what we have to do, and a split squat is a meat and potatoes exercise, but what we have to do is adapt that exercise a little bit. We've got a little bit more vertical shin going on. We're trying to work a little bit more on glutes. So we've actually got a little bit more of a hinge going on with that. So it's kind of like a hingy kind of lunge variation that we're using at the moment. And it's also kind of less wear and tear on her knees. So that's an example of a meat and potatoes exercise, but we're not trying to fit you to the mold of what a normal split squat, let's say a Bulgarian split squat, looks like. We're trying to fit that exercise to you and your body structure. So take home message for you if you're doing your own training. If an exercise does not feel good, do not do it. Choose exercises that feel good. That's always a good approach when it comes to exercise selection. They feel good, you can stick at them for weeks, if not months on end, and you can see improvements within those exercises. That's how you choose an exercise that's going to work for you better. Are you training to build a body that you're proud of, or are you training just for fun? Now, I really hate to have this conversation because look, I do enjoy training and I do mix things up myself, and I do actually allow my clients to have a certain degree of freedom within their training plans depending on the time of year they're on, the phase that they're on. Obviously, if they're preparing for a competition or a photo shoot, it's a little bit more rigid and I want them to be sticking to an exact plan. But when you set foot in the gym, do you have a plan to stick to? Do you have a plan that's progressive, that you can see personal bests with week in, week out, that you can stick to for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks and actually see your body change as a result of that? Or are you going to the gym for an individual workout? You decide on the day what you want to do based on how you feel or just in general what you enjoy doing. Now, there are some people that enjoy doing certain exercises more than others, yet they're not the exercises that they need to be putting in the work in to actually see the results and changes that they want to be. So for example, if you want better built hamstrings and your leg day always looks like a bunch of squat variations because you're enjoying squat variations, then it's just not going to be getting you the results that you obviously want to be seeing, even though you might be having a little bit more fun by doing what you want. We're putting in time, we're putting in effort, we want to be seeing the changes, the return of time investment that we're putting in. So you need a plan that you can stick to, write it down. You can obviously adapt the exercises over time, but try to stick with a plan rather than workout hop. Strength training versus cardio mentality. The easy way to see this is that you should be strength training or resistance training to build muscle and to build strength. Obviously, if you don't have the calories coming in, so you're in a dieting phase, then the reality is you're not going to be building much muscle, building much strength. You're striving to maintain muscle, striving to maintain strength when those calories are a little bit lower. Obviously, when the calories are coming in, you're going to see massive improvements, leaps in strength and leaps in lean muscle tissue as well. Now, when it comes to cardiovascular work, we just want to see that as a way to encourage calorie output, okay? So we're adding in cardiovascular work as a baseline to improve things like cardiovascular health, mitochondrial density, your mitochondria kind of being the powerhouses that allow us to burn more calories and have kind of a healthy metabolism. But we're also using cardiovascular work as a way to drive calorie output. So it might be that, I do, 200 calories worth on a bike, and I don't tend to program cardiovascular work for my clients in terms of how many calories burnt. I tend to do it on time and the intensity, i.e. heart rate zones. But let's say you're burning 200 calories on a bike. That's great. That's another 200 calories you can eat in theory that will still allow you to stay in a deficit in a dieting phase, or helping you to manage body composition in a muscle gaining phase. Big mistake I see is almost treating your resistance workouts like they're part of that calorie burn equation, and they're there to improve fat loss, and then cardio is there to improve fat loss. And in your resistance training workouts, trying to keep your heart rate up, keeping your rest periods short, adding burpees or whatever you want to between sets, okay? The best way to create a calorie deficit overall is going to be diet. We can get most of our work through that diet, but then cardio is that cardio base for health and that top off in terms of those extra calories that you want to be burning. Fasted versus non-fasted cardio. Now, this is one of the biggest questions I get in terms of which one is best. As always, it depends, and it depends on you. Now, I do tend to find that fasted cardio fits people's schedules a little bit better. It kind of gets you in that mindset of getting it done early. I'm also a big fan of just doing something early in the day that's hard. It sets you up for the rest of the day. It's kind of like these people that jump into ice baths first thing in the morning. You've done something kind of hard that's challenging mentally, and then everything else for the rest of the day feels a little bit easier. So I'm a big fan of it from that perspective, but it also kind of gets it out of the way with first thing in the morning. It also delays that first meal of the day. So when you're dieting especially, then just delaying that first meal by say 30 minutes, pushing it later in the day by another 30 minutes, can make a big impact on the day. So there are a few reasons why fasted cardio can work better for some people. For other people, fed cardio can be better because it might just fit their schedule a little bit better. So fed cardio, really you want to be keeping it away from your workouts as much as possible, away from your resistance workouts as much as possible. I'm not a big fan of having it post-workout, but if that's the only time of day you can do it based on your schedule, post-workout's fine. But apart from that, go on Facebook Marketplace, go on Craigslist, whatever, find a cheap spinning bike, get it in your house, and you can do that at any time of day. It just makes things so much easier. So whether fasted cardio or fed cardio is best, it depends on you. We know from the research that they're about the same in terms of the amount of fat loss that you get from them, or in terms of the amount of calories that you burn, is very, very similar. And yes, more of a percentage of the calorie burn from fasted cardio comes from fat because you've got more free fatty acids available for you to be burnt first thing in the morning, but that doesn't necessarily equate to long-term fat loss. So you get kind of similar results. However, from a mindset standpoint, you've got to consider which one's best, and the one that will fit your mindset best and the structure of your day will be the one that gets the best results. You're not sleeping enough. Well, I don't sleep enough, so I've got a toddler and a very young one, and look, they keep me up all night, okay? Especially actually more so the toddler than anything else. I just make it a rule just to go to bed a little bit earlier and try to improve the quality of the sleep that I am getting. Now, you'll hear all the time that like 8 hours is optimal. Now, the truth of the matter is that actually some people do function optimally at 6 hours. There are certain people with certain genetics where they do need 11 hours. We also do know that the older that you get, the less sleep you do actually require. Now, there are some great resources on optimizing sleep out there, so I'm not going to go into that. But what we've got to do is we've got to think about sleep as the driving force behind our health, behind our body composition. So if your sleep is compromised, your hormonal profile is compromised, and especially for women over 35, this obviously isn't good. If we have a bad night's sleep, we also know that we tend to eat a little bit more the next day. That's because our blood sugars are just all over the place. So it's not necessarily that the sleep in itself is affecting fat loss, it's what sleep does to our brain and everything else as a result of that as well. So if we learn to optimize our sleep, we optimize our hormonal profile, we optimize our energy balance throughout the day, and we just feel better, we get stronger workouts, we get better results at the end of it. There are various things you can do to optimize your sleep. I'm a big fan of like some of the meditation apps. I don't listen to like the whale songs and stuff like that, but some of the meditation apps are great. You can use like things like magnesium before bed. L-theanine is a great one. Apigenin, and possibly some benefits to that. You can also use very low doses of melatonin as well, the timed release one. I wouldn't rely on that in the long run, but you can use something like 5 milligrams of that when you need to, especially when it comes to melatonin, because I do know a lot of people rely on that. I would take the stance that use it only when you need to. So if, for example, you know you've got a big lower body session the next day and you want a great night's sleep, use it. But if, for example, you've got an arm session the next day, you're sleeping okay, you've got a question before you go to bed, like, do I use this supplement? It could be melatonin, it could be something else. Do I need to use this to optimize my sleep, or can I hold it back for another day when it's gonna have a bigger impact? If you find you're waking up early, or earlier than what's planned, I'm a big fan of KSM 66. That's the form of ashwagandha that's been shown to help kind of suppress cortisol levels and is a general adaptogen. So that can improve sleep quality if it's more that you're waking up early, but doesn't necessarily improve sleep quality. As always, caffeine, try to cut caffeine by midday, because that half-life, even if you're having it around 1, 2, is still going to be hitting you at 9, 10, 11 p.m. at night, and it's going to be disrupting your sleep patterns. So optimize your sleep and everything else does just fall into place. Think about non-exercise physical activity. Now, what is non-exercise physical activity, or NEPA for short? So it's basically the movement that you're doing outside of your exercise, or if it were one of my clients, your planned exercise in your calendar. Anything outside of that is non-exercise physical activity. So one of the things that people mention all the time is step count. Now, there's nothing inherently special about step count, and the number 10,000 basically came out of nowhere, but we do know it's a good general recommendation as a starting point, anywhere between 7 and 10,000 steps a day. But if, for example, as your coach, I was telling you to hit a certain step count, we're standardizing the kind of the calorie output you get throughout the day outside of your, whether you're doing cardiovascular work or your strength training sessions. It standardizes the calorie output throughout the day, okay? So there's nothing special about it, but it just has that baseline for us. If you're doing gardening all the time, if you're cutting your grass, if you've got a highly active job, technically it's non-exercise physical activity. But unlike step count, which is easy to track, that stuff isn't so much. So a good starting point just to know your output outside of exercise is just to see what your step count is on the average day. And then let's say you're someone just starting out, then it might just be that we try and strive for an increased step count. Or if like you're one of my competitors and we don't have much time to do extra, say, cardio work, or we can't fit in an extra strength training session and we've got to dig deep, well, it might just be that I give you a step count to do, and you can even work whilst you're doing your step count. You can walk on an incline treadmill, you can do some typing work on your phone or your laptop. There's so much stuff you can do just by doing your step count at the same time. You're not getting your bloods tested. So especially if you're over 35, you should be getting your bloods tested about every 6 months. Now you can do more frequently if you've had some red flags in there. You can get kind of smaller panel tests, like little pinprick tests, but you should be getting a full blood panel about every 6 months so you can see where your body's at. I see it all the time where people are using certain supplements that they think they need to be using, but actually they're not the supplements that they need to be using because they're not deficient in those things. So instead, what you want to be doing is looking at your blood panel, you're looking at your hormone levels, especially testosterone, estrogen, your T3, T4, liver enzymes, cholesterol. You want to be looking at everything, and you want to be looking at what levels those are at before you start thinking about supplementing with anything. One of the most recent stories I've heard is actually a woman who's 40 years old. She was given by her GP a testosterone rub, a testosterone cream, which I won't go into the downside of that. But anyway, they were given that without even having their bloods tested. They simply went into their GP and had some of the signs, symptoms that their testosterone was low, and they were given a testosterone cream. We had her have an independent test, which actually showed that her testosterone was almost off the scale. So you've got to be looking at these things. As I said, I see these things all the time where people are wasting money or they're using things that their body does not need. You want to be optimizing yourself, putting the right things into your body. You're overthinking your meal prep. Now, if you're not like a seasoned competitor and you're looking at all these people doing meal prep and laying out all of their Tupperware with everything in it and all their meals planned for the week, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. But that's the stuff that you kind of need to be doing if you're at that level. Now, if you're someone that's just doing like a photo shoot, or you're just looking to get in bikini body shape for the beach, meal prep to you might simply be preparing the breakfast the night before, right? So as an example, like I prepare like protein waffles the night before, and then I reheat them in the morning, or I prepare them like in batches, put them in the freezer, and then I can put them in the toaster and reheat them in the morning. So that is a form of meal prep. It can be like cooking a load of rice all at the same time. So instead of spending loads of cash on these pre-prepared pouches of rice, just cook a load of rice all at the same time. Boiling water, salt your rice is a lot cheaper. And then what you can do is you can even put that in the freezer, or it should last in the refrigerator for something like 4 days or so. Same with meats. You can just prepare your meats for the week. You can just prepare some potatoes for the week, or even just for a few days. So don't kind of make it overcomplicated. You don't need to be, overwhelmed by doing all these fancy meal prep things and preparing like all 7 days in advance. But just a little bit of preparation of your food, even if it's just the day before for the next day, will set you up for success. You've got to make your schedule work for you. If you grew up reading loads of magazines, or you check out loads of influencers that tell you they're training this amount per week, they're putting in all this time, well, you're probably being told lies. Now, we don't all need to be training 5-6 days per week. If you're one of my competitors, sure, like we're leading up to a show, we want to be ticking those boxes, we want to be prioritizing that within our schedule. but we've also got to be making sure that it's realistic as well. Now, if you're someone that's training to look great on the beach, then you don't need to be doing 5-6 training sessions a week, especially if you don't have the time for it. So what you want to be doing, instead of thinking about, meeting that sweet spot, that golden level of training, you want to be thinking about what can you realistically manage right now that you can stay consistent with. If you can only realistically get to the gym for 3 days a week, then that's absolutely fine. Tell your coach you can only train 3 days a week. You can work with 3 days a week, get consistent over that. They can optimize that training around that time you have allocated towards that. And then if at any point, a good coach will just adapt that training based on you. So if you say to them that you can do 4 days a week now because you've already built up some consistency, then they can program 4-day per week training schedules. So you've got to build things around you, and that's the way to set yourself up for long-term sustainable success.